Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about how with the slightest gain in polling or the slightest underestimation in polling come election day, Kamala Harris can win the 2024 election by a truly substantial margin. What you're looking at on this map is the current 2024 map according to the 538 average of polls. Now, you can say, what you want about these polling averages. There are a lot of Republican sponsored polls that do flood these averages. However, this is where things stand. All polls considered, the point of the video, this is where things stand in each individual state. In Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, Kamala Harris has a lead of less than 1%. It's just about 50-50, and even that lead is dwindling in all three of these states. Now, in Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, we'll look at all of these averages here, but you can see Donald Trump has a lead of over 1% in all three. So let's just take a look at how close some of these states are. In Wisconsin, it's literally dead even. I think that, wow, okay, last time I checked, Harris was ahead by 0.1, but I guess it's even now. In Pennsylvania, Harris is ahead by literally 0.1%. Absolutely insane. You never see margins like this. In Nevada, she's ahead by 0.5%. In Michigan, Kamala Harris ahead by 0.5% as well. In North Carolina, Trump is ahead by 0.9%, a tilt margin there. Whoops, I actually have to fix my map here to make it a tilt state. But in Georgia, Trump is ahead now by 2 percentage points, 2 percentage points. And then Arizona, Donald Trump is ahead also exactly by 2 percentage points. So it is really stunning to see margins like this. And what you'll notice about all of these states is that they are within a 2% margin of each candidate, which is really stunning to see. So the fact of the matter is, if Kamala Harris can gain 2%, from now until election day, or if she's underestimated by 2%, or a mix of those two factors, then she could entirely, in the realm of possibility, win all 7 battleground states. That would probably mean that Michigan is lean, Pennsylvania's lean, Nevada's lean, and then she wins by the narrowest of margins, Arizona, and then it comes out on top narrowly. It'd be tied, rounding to the 10th of the percentage point, but she can pull out wins in Georgia and North Carolina. You never see polling averages where all 7 battleground states are within 2%. That's absolutely insane, and it just speaks to the partisanship of this election and how close, these battleground states are. You might notice that the blue states are becoming more bluer every election, election after election. The red states are becoming redder election after election. And these 7 battleground states are closer than ever, and they're becoming the only battleground states that even matter in elections. The others aren't even in consideration. Minnesota's likely, by the way. So, these 7 core battleground states, they're all within a 2% margin. So if Kamala Harris can gain the slightest amount of support across these states, then she sweeps all 7 and she wins 319 electoral votes to Trump's 219, and in the end, the election isn't even that close despite all the forecasts predicting a 50-50 race, despite all the analysts, all the pundits, all the polls saying that it's just about a 50-50 race between Harris and Trump. Even with that, Harris wins by a very healthy margin. And I don't say the same thing about Donald Trump, because when you look at where he is in the polling right now, in the national polling, what is he at? The margin aside, Kamala Harris aside, what is Donald Trump at in terms of percentage in the national numbers? It's 46.3. This is exactly in line with what you'd expect when you find how many undecideds there are, right? So when you add these together and subtract it from 100, this comes out to 94.7%. So you still have about 5% of the electorate, third parties aside, that are undecided, that in these polls are saying they're undecided. They're not yet saying in these polls that they are going to support Harris or Trump. Now, this is important. That 46.3 is important, and that 5% of undecideds is important, because in 2020, you got to look at historical trends here. In 2020, Trump won 46.8% of the popular vote. 46.8. In 2016, He won even less, and that was because there were more prominent third parties, but he won 46.1. So the fact of the matter is, it is proven time and time again that Donald Trump has this floor in presidential elections of the nationwide vote around 46%. In 2016 and 2020, he got between 46 and 47% of the vote. And in the polls right now, he is at 46%. If we follow these historical trends, the vast majority of undecideds are going to break to Harris. So what this does is it does open the opportunity come election day. The undecided still not reflected in polls, but they will be reflected, of course, in the election results. You can't say that you're undecided at the ballot box and not vote for anyone. It will be reflected. So it is possible for Kamala Harris to gain, whoops, wrong map, to gain 2% from what the polls are saying today, whether that be in the polls from now until election day, or whether that be a 2% underestimation in the polls, or as I said before, a mix of both. Kamala Harris has that opportunity. She has that opportunity to do 2% better from now until election day, from what the polls are saying right now, and sweep all 7 core battleground states. Again, Donald Trump, as election analysts and everything say, Donald Trump is at his ceiling. It is proven time and time again. He has a ceiling of 46 to 47%. That's what he is. That's what he's at right now. The undecideds are going to break heavily towards Harris, looking at historical trends, especially considering that I don't think that Donald Trump is nearly as strong of a candidate as he was in 2016. In the 2016 election, Donald Trump was an oddly strong candidate. It wasn't reflected in the polling. There were many hidden Trump voters, right? The shy Trump voters. They didn't like Trump as a person, and they were frankly embarrassed to vote for him, so they didn't admit it in polls. But come election day, a lot of them did. That wasn't picked up in the polls, obviously. There were too many people afraid to say that they were voting for Trump in the polls. That's not a factor anymore. Obviously, after 3 elections, after now this race being close, people are fine saying that they're going to vote for Trump. Being a shy Trump voter in polls is not a factor. All in all, it makes complete sense for Donald Trump to retain this ceiling of 46 to 47%. And he is at it right now. All in all, these undecided voters, I feel like if they're still undecided, then they're not going to vote for Donald Trump after now 3 elections of him campaigning. Again, they're going to break heavily towards Harris. She could seriously, realistically gain 2%. So while this race is so 50-50, it still opens the door for Kamala Harris to gain just the smallest of margins, just like 2%. And boom, because of how close these states are, because they're all just about 50-50, she wins all 7 core battlegrounds, and it's not even that close of an election, despite everything you have heard about it. So this is an extremely important fact to keep in mind come election day, and I would just say, don't be super shocked if this is the map. I certainly wouldn't, because of how close these margins are. Again, I do think that undecideds will break heavily for Harris. She will be slightly underestimated in the polls, and even though that is just a slight underestimation, because of how close these 7 battlegrounds are, it will reflect in a clean sweep of all 7. Now, I'm not predicting this just yet. I think that Trump takes Georgia by a tilt margin, and I think he takes North Carolina by a tilt margin, but less than 1%. I certainly can't accurately predict a state when I think it's less than 1%. Nobody can, even if you're a numerical forecaster and has this model, this machine and that spits out results, everything like that, you can't get it spot on, within a percentage point every time. So it could very well be that North Carolina votes Dem, Georgia votes Dem. And this is not a new thing, of course, a change in the polling results to the elections. People are so caught up, on these averages. And yes, they should be concerned about the trajectory. That is for sure, right? For Harris supporters should be. As you can see, Trump just gained a lot in Georgia. He is making these once pretty healthy Harris leads in like Wisconsin. He's making them much, much, much closer. It was once 3.5% margin for Harris there. It is now exactly even today. So they should be scared about the trajectory, and we'll see how that plays out. However, the I mean, the margin is another thing, right? The margin again, it's so close, and the polls could so easily be off. You can't, just because Donald Trump has a 0.9% lead in North Carolina, that barely means anything at all. It's literally probably 50-50 if polls are saying that he's winning by point 0.9. You've got to look at other things. You got to look at cultural trends and everything. So, for example, what I mean by that is when you look at the 2020 election, what I did was mapped out the final polling averages in each state from 2020. So this is what the 2020 election map would have looked like if the polling had been right. Obviously, a Joe Biden landslide, and this did not amount to that. This is the actual election map. This is what the poll said on election day. Poll said he'd win Florida, he'd win North Carolina, he'd win Maine second. He didn't win those three at all, and that is a significant chunk of electoral votes. They said Ohio, Trump would win by a less than 1% margin. He won it by 8. They said what? They said Michigan, or they said Wisconsin would be like an 8-point margin. It was a 0.6% margin for Biden. The polls were so obviously off. So if this works in the opposite direction, right? The polls are working so hard to not underestimate Trump as they did in 2016 and 2020. We don't know for sure, but it looks like they have cracked the code looking considering the fact that he already is at his ceiling, right? He already is at his ceiling of 46% to 47% in the nationwide votes. They probably cracked the code, I think. I don't think that the polls will be very off this election. A little bit, but again, just a little bit changes the entire map. So the polls can be very off, right? They said Biden would win 350 electoral votes. He only won 306. That is significantly off. They said he would win the popular vote by 8.4%. He only won it by 4%. So Trump did 4% better, right? He made up 4% in the polls compared to the actual results. 4%, not a whole ton, and that changed the outcome of almost 350 electoral votes, as you can see here. Almost if Ohio was looking a little better for Biden, could have made up almost 70 electoral votes, which is 4 points gained nationwide from the polls to the actual results. So with just half of that, if Kamala Harris just has to make up 2%, right, instead of that 4% that Trump made up in 2020, if she makes up just 2%, then what are we looking at? Again, Trump gained 50 with that 4%, 50 electoral votes. Are we looking at Harris gaining 25 electoral votes, half of the 4% that Trump made up? I don't know. I'm sure you can't make that assumption based on those facts I laid out, but still something to keep in mind. What an interesting election we are in, just 17 days away. So make sure to subscribe, especially for these remaining 17 days. I know I should be getting 3 videos out today. I'm pushing out a bunch of videos, so to stay up to date with this election, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, drop a comment to let me hear your thoughts on this topic, and I will see you all next time.